Hi everyone, we're going to get started with today's session. We do have some more pizza and drinks, so for those of you that are joining us in person, feel free to go grab some either now or at the end of the program today. But we are going to start by kicking off today's session, which is just a nice overview of entrepreneurial thinking. So we're going to start off with a land acknowledgement. So the University of Calgary, located in the heart of southern Alberta, both acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised the Siksika, the Pekainai and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So I will be your presenter for today's topic. My name, for those of you that don't know and haven't got a million emails from me, which is probably all of you, is Alessandra or Alessa, and I'm the Venture Program Specialist here at the Hunter Hub. Basically what that means is that I run the sort of entrepreneurship programs here at the university, and I'm also the co-founder and COO of my own company, Algae, and I'll be talking a little bit more about how that company got started as kind of an example of some first steps for you guys to get started. So we'll be jumping into that closer to the end of the presentation today. So we're going to quickly talk about what entrepreneurial thinking is, what are different types of entrepreneurship, where good ideas come from, first steps in starting a business, and then we're going to go through some kind of entrepreneurship startup jargon that will be really helpful to kind of go through prior to upcoming sessions. So just to quickly start, entrepreneurial thinking is being creative and finding innovative solutions. So it does not just mean starting a unicorn high growth startup, but it's kind of involving discipline and taking initiative and being very resourceful and constantly learning and innovating both within and amongst fields. So the word entrepreneur comes from the French word entreprendre, which is to undertake or to adventures, which basically means you go out and you do things. And as you guys are going to discover, especially with the tools that we have in the first semester, we're really going to force you to go out and go talk to people and go do things. It's not something you cannot build a business from behind a computer. So we're going to force you to go out and do things. So entrepreneurial thinking can look like a variety of different things. And one thing I really love is not necessarily staying within your discipline of like what you studied or what experience you already have. So an engineering student building an event platform, an education student working on training solutions for burnouts, but then you also have kind of wild out there things like a kinesiology student making a popsicle business. So it's really about kind of applying those creative skills and passions to whatever problem you see fit. So entrepreneurial thinking is learning by doing in order to adapt to the future. So again, kind of that transdisciplinary working across fields, across solutions. You're gonna fail a lot and you're gonna learn that that's actually a really good thing, and you wanna fail fast and fail quickly so you can constantly be learning from that and using it as a tool. And also really focusing on collaboration and networks. Again, you're gonna see sort of the power that can have in helping you to learn from people who have more experience or another perspective, but also really help you to advance leaps and bounds. And we can have solutions both big and small that can create huge impacts. So there's sort of a mindset related to entrepreneurial thinking. It's really that out-of-the-box thinking, but it's about recognizing opportunity, being resilient. Risk management is a huge thing. You're constantly making decisions, and it could feel like a very tiny decision, and then later you learn like you really messed something up. So, and then just kind of designing and like acting on whatever action you're doing. So entrepreneurial thinking is like understanding that there's always a better solution that's possible and unlocking sort of these possibilities and opportunities. And you can do this like no matter where you are, no matter what experience you have, no matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter if you're a nurse. It's obviously not an obvious, profession where there's innovation, but we can tell you a handful of nurses who have created really impactful startups that are shaping not just the healthcare industry, but a variety of other industries. So it doesn't really matter where you are. There's always possibilities and opportunities. It can include patents, it can include bringing products to market, but innovation is really what allows Canada to adapt and change and become better prepared for the future. So just some quick stats about Canada and the entrepreneurship landscape here. One, innovation and entrepreneurship drive productivity and global competitiveness. Canada is actually not the best at doing this, and so there's a really big emphasis on helping people really develop their startups and build and grow so that we can kind of contribute more to the global economy. The majority of new jobs in modern economies are created by firms that are actually less than 5 years old, and 4 to 10% of startups become high growth firms, so they can create many new jobs and they can create them way faster. And then small to medium-sized businesses are actually 98% of companies in Canada, which means it creates the vast majority of jobs. I think small businesses are something that are often overlooked. We're going to jump into what small businesses can look like in a little bit, but that's such a huge number, like 98% of the global economy, of the Canadian economy is small to medium businesses. So don't underestimate the power and the impact that those businesses can have. So as an innovative nation, Canada is a world leader in research, so science, technology, and innovation. It's one of the most innovative economies in the world, but like I said, we're not good at translating that economy into functional businesses, and so that's why there's a big focus. So there's right now $15.4 billion of science, technology, and innovation-related R&D spending by Canadian businesses, and entrepreneurs make up 17% of that labor force. Meanwhile, Canada is generating over 4% of that STI knowledge, despite accounting for just 0.5% of the world's population. And Canada's performance is consistently strong in quality of education, market regulation, and social factors. So again, it's an ecosystem that's ripe for innovation and ripe for entrepreneurship, and kind of governing bodies know that and have kind of created a bunch of programs to help you guys out in doing that. And so again, we're going to touch more on that later in the year, but there's a lot of opportunity out there. Okay, types of entrepreneurship. So I'm just going to get, like, when you guys hear the word entrepreneur, can you guys, a few people just shout out, if you're on the YouTube, you feel free to just put it in the chat. What does the word entrepreneur mean to you? Problem solver, great. Anyone else? Sorry? Innovation and risk taker, awesome. Yes, anyone else? Pardon? Filling the gaps, absolutely. So that's quite a diverse range of words, but they're all accurate and they all encompass what it means to be an entrepreneur. As you're gonna find, when you start something, whether it's a startup, whether it's a social enterprise, you're gonna be wearing a ton of different hats. And honestly, that's kind of the fun of it, is getting to do a bunch of different things. So a few things. Entrepreneurship is defined as individuals identifying opportunities, allocating resources, and creating value through the identification of unmet needs or opportunities. So a lot of the things that were just mentioned. And then social entrepreneurship is identifying a social problem and using entrepreneurial principles to organize, create, and manage a venture to make social change. Something that is often misunderstood, social entrepreneurship can still be in for-profit businesses, for example. We're going to walk through a few examples, but it's really about, the core of it is really about identifying a social problem. So not to say you can't make money, not to say you can't make profit, but really identifying a problem, a social problem, and solving that. And ultimately, the purpose of any business is to find and serve customers profitably. You do need to make money, not just to sustain yourself, but also to sustain your business. So definitely, profitability is a big thing. So a few myths of entrepreneurship. One, entrepreneurs are geniuses, heroes, solopreneurs. This is definitely not true. I think there's a lot of solopreneurs out there, people who are the faces of the company, but often if you look just a little bit deeper, they've got a whole team, they've got a co-founder, they've got a whole team, they've got a board, probably got some employees behind them, especially those kind of high-growth startups. So you don't have to go it alone, and it's actually really advised that you don't, because entrepreneurship is a long and hard road, and having people there to support you and having people to go at it with you is a huge help. Oftentimes too, not geniuses, not heroes. Ultimately what it is, again, people identifying problems, identifying those unmet needs, and trying to find a solution and building that solution to solve that problem. It may at the after seem a little like it was an obvious solution, but it obviously wasn't that obvious if it took that long for someone to come up with it. Again, average age of entrepreneurs, I think we see so much in the media of like these really, really young entrepreneurs, but there's actually something to be said for entrepreneurs who are in their 40s and 50s who have a lot of experience already working in a field, gaining kind of expertise and then building something. So no matter what age you're at, you're not too early and you're not too late to be an entrepreneur. Innovation has also a myth is innovation has kind of a quick flash of insight. This is also not true. It often takes a ton of brainstorming and thinking to come up with solutions, testing, trialing, and erroring. So don't think of like this quick spark of like, I'm gonna do this, or like I have this great idea, because there's often quite a bit more work that goes into it. Lastly, money as a motivator to start a business. Any entrepreneur here can tell you that is not a great motivation to start a business, because even if you are become a unicorn is a company with a valuation of $1 billion or more. The time it's going to take and on the onset of actually personal investments and the stress about money, you're not going to make money for a really long time. So if your motivator of starting a business is to make money, probably better to just go get a really well-paying job, because if you do make a ton of money, you're years and years out from doing that. Okay, so there's a few different types of entrepreneurs. We've got small business owners, consultants and contractors, startups, and social ventures, which are also often considered startups. So small businesses are kind of the things you would think of. Storefronts, restaurants, studios, franchises, online stores. So these would be kind of those mom and pop shops. You might have like a few locations, one location, but typically, you know, it's more of what you'd call sort of a lifestyle business, in the sense that you're not going to have crazy amount of employees, you're not going to have crazy amount of kind of expense. It's really about kind of creating a brand that can sustain you, that can sustain some employees. So that's small businesses. Consultant and contractors, again, similar to that kind of lifestyle business where you're kind of creating enough of a profile, reputation, consumer base that can support you, maybe your employees, but that's sort of the extent of it. So these can include professional services, support services, rehab professionals, trades, anything like that. These are all kind of consultants and contractors and are another example of entrepreneurs. Then we've got scalable startups. So these are the startups that we kind of all know today. You've got the Ubers, the Neos, Skip the Dishes, where they started really small with an idea. They probably started with like a few people in like someone's basement or someone's garage, and then have grown and created these huge companies. Similar to what I pointed out to at the beginning, where a lot of these companies are the ones that actually create the new jobs in the economy and are able to grow and create many jobs very, very quickly. So a startup is a temporary organization. Don't know why the word temporary is there, to be honest, designed to look for a business model that is repeatable and scalable. You want to eventually make that not a temporary organization and a very permanent organization, something like Amazon and Uber that we know and is super well used. But again, designed to look for a business model that's repeatable and scalable. And that repeatable and scalable is super important because it allows you to start with one market, figure out that business model, grow that business model in the area, and then repeat it in multiple different geographic regions, in multiple different industries, whatever that is. So that repeatable and scalable is definitely kind of a highlight thing to remember. These startups are kind of built with the goal of serving a mass group, so beyond one region. So when we looked at the consultant and contractors, when we looked at the small businesses, they're typically serving one group. If it's a physical location of like a store or a restaurant, they're serving probably one geographic area. And if it's an online store, even if they have, let's say, North America reach, they're serving a very specific group or demographic of kind of consumer, whereas startups are looking to serve a mass group beyond one region. They also have, again, models that can be replicated and used in different locations, in different markets, in different industries, and they're typically solving common problems that are very relevant to a large group of people, again, and they can move between markets, between geographic regions, and whatnot. This diagram on the side is really important as well, just to show that it is an iterative process. It is a continuous process, so it's not you start, you build something, and you go from there. You're starting, you're building, you're measuring what you've built, you're learning based off those observations, and then you're going back to the drawing board and you're iterating and you're improving on that initial product, service, idea that you built, and you're continuing that process. This continues on, like even once you're considered like a successful business, this continues on. A great example with Apple with the iPhone, there's a reason there's different versions because they keep making it better. They have software updates to make the bugs and the glitches go away, but they also have like the physical hardware that they keep improving. So there's a better camera, it's faster, whatever that might be. So even companies that are super established are still going to constantly follow this build, measure, and learn cycle. Again, scalable startups built, okay, we already did this. Okay, I'm just going to show this example of what a lean startup is. Specifically.
Building and perfecting a robust product. The lean startup is an approach coined by Eric Ries to build companies and launch products quicker and more in line with customer needs. It eliminates long development times and large amounts of funding to launch a company. Many companies currently spend months or even years building and perfecting a robust product or service, only to learn that customers don't want specific features or the product altogether. This is the problem the lean startup solves. The lean startup involves a company building a minimum viable product or a version of the product that has just enough features to be released. Building only the minimum set of features is important in order to get the product in front of customers to get feedback. It may have some bugs, but the MVP is typically shown to early adopters who are more likely to look past these bugs. The company uses the MVP to get feedback in order to learn exactly what customers want. They take those learnings and decide whether to continue to build a product, whether to tweak the product, or to pivot, which is a change in direction to test a hypothesis about the product, strategy, or engine of growth. The company continues this cycle, which is called the build, measure, learn feedback loop. The lean startup approach shortens product development cycles and builds products that meet customer needs through validated learning, scientific experimentation, and iterative product releases.
So that video touched on sort of a few key things. One is this idea of launching a minimum viable product. We're going to have a session in November that really dives deep into what a minimum viable product is and what prototyping can look like. But ultimately, the idea is that you want to get something, again, if we go back to this cycle, you want to get a product, a service, whatever version of whatever it is you're trying to build out as quickly as possible. Not everyone's going to like it. People are going to complain and people are going to hate it. But ultimately what you want to go after is that first group of people who are really resonating with the problem that you're solving. And you want to get as much feedback so you can measure what's working, figure what's not working, learn from that, and go back. And that's sort of the idea of this lean startup, is not just creating the final product and putting that out to market, because the amount of time it takes to create a final product by the time you actually talk to customers and then build something and then get the complete product out to market, what the customers want in today's world that's constantly changing, improving, and upgrading it's probably not even going to be what they wanted anymore, because their needs have changed based off of new technologies, new services that have come out. So the lean startup idea is really about getting products out as quickly as possible. One of my favorite things related to this is the idea that if you don't look back on your first MVP and you don't cringe at like how bad it was and how embarrassing it was, you probably launched your first MVP too late. I will show you examples of what my first product looked like, and it is so horrible, and I think about it and I'm like, I can't believe we launched to market with that. We sold it, but we had that first early adopter who was super excited about the product, super happy with the problem that the product solved, and they didn't care what it looked like. They didn't care, if my product is a physical product, but if it was like something like a software, they would be okay with putting up with those bugs because they know you're gonna fix them. So try to get things out as quickly as possible so that you can continue to do that iterative cycle. Okay, and then the final type of ventures are social ventures. So some examples, Toms, I don't love Toms because they're not the best example because they kind of messed up the ecosystems that they were trying to help. So if we focus on something like Patagonia and Warby Parker, these are companies that don't just exist to kind of sell a product or service and make money, but they actually exist to have an impact. So in the case of Patagonia, they are trying to have an impact on sustainability in sort of the clothing, outdoor gear space. You can still make money and have an impact. So this idea that you can do social good and you have to be a nonprofit or a charity is not true. You can still make money, and if you're a functioning business, you do need to make money to sustain that business, but you can still have a positive impact, whether that's on the communities you're helping, the people you're helping, this environment, whatever that is, you can still have an impact and make money. They often will operate very similar to a startup, but it's really important for companies that do want to be a social venture that you kind of figure out what impact you want to create from the onset, because that's going to help influence every decision that you make onwards. And again, depending on what that social venture is, you can kind of act like a small business servicing one region if you're just trying to help out that one area, or you can operate as a startup and kind of have a very broad reach beyond just one geographic area, region, industry, whatever. So there's pros and cons of both. Small business owners, typically and consultant and contractors, typically you're going to be there day to day, you're going to be doing a lot of the work. For some people, they love that, they want that. For some people, they want to be able to kind of build something and then pass off some of that work to other people. Typically, that's what you're doing. So you're more involved hands-on in the day-to-day going on in the business. So you're working in the business and you're also working on the business. For startups and social ventures that are operating as a startup, typically you're working more on the business. So you've got people that you've hired to work in the business, so that might be doing the day-to-day stuff. And what you're really focused on as the founder is really building out the growth plan, really creating new opportunities, and whatnot. On the early days, where you guys are just getting started, they might look a little bit similar because you've really got to kind of hit the ground running and do a lot of that legwork yourself. But the startups will typically grow a little bit quicker, and you'll need to hire more people more rapidly compared to a small business owners and a consultant or contractor, where you might need to hire one to a small team, but you don't need to hire a bunch of employees because you're not going to be this huge enterprise. So again, pros and cons, and something that's really important to think about is, like, what do you as an individual want? What are your goals? One, that's something that's really important to consider, because if you don't want to be working necessarily every day in the business, you don't want to be doing the day-to-day stuff like dealing with customers, doing the accounting and the bookkeeping, you might not want to do some of that small business stuff, versus for startups, when you can kind of, eventually, once you have enough money, can kind of hire someone to handle more of that day-to-day stuff and work on the business. So again, it's ultimately like, what do you want? And also what your idea is. Not every idea is going to be a startup, and not every idea is going to be for a small business. So you have to also pick what's right for you and the lifestyle you want, but also for your idea. Okay. Any questions on anything we talked about so far? Okay. So next we're going to talk about where good ideas come from. So good ideas can be hard to find. A lot of times they take sort of a lot of thinking and time to sort out, but good ideas typically come from solving a product. So it can be a problem that you're facing yourself. It can be a problem that you're noticing in society. It can be a problem that like a friend or family member is facing, but really about creating a product or service or process that help to solve that problem. You can also build on existing ideas, so constantly refining and improving things over time. Example of, this isn't maybe the best example, but Uber basically refined on the idea of a taxi. It wasn't, there's not really this, there's this idea that nothing is new and everything is just constantly building on each other. And so constantly refining things, making things better, smoother, whatever. So if you see something and you're like, hey, this is really time consuming, this process really is time consuming, this software is really difficult to use, whatever that may be, iterating on that and building off of that could be a good way to kind of come up with a new idea. Similar to this is reassembling, so kind of taking things and really coming at it from a new perspective, a new angle, and kind of reassembling them into new ways. Collaborating is just talking and listening to people in the market. We're gonna push you to like actually go out and talk to people. So talking to them and listening to them, understanding like what problems they're facing, and then from there starting to formulate what ideas you can build and solve around that. And then this again relates to kind of asking questions. It's like, go out and talk to people and find the problem and really understand that problem. So if it's not a problem you experience, put yourself in the shoes of the people who are experiencing that, and then build and develop a solution around it. So this is a very funny quote. It was in 1899 that someone from the commissioner of the US Patent Office said. He said, everything that can be invented has been invented. We obviously know that not to be true today, but as I said, everything is sort of built off of another idea and another concept. So it's always a good time to be building and thinking about how you can constantly be improving and iterating on new solutions, on existing solutions, and just kind of making generally making life easier for yourself and for everyone. So a few ways to build the venture. One is this customer development idea, which is kind of actually going out and talking to customers early and often. Even once you've figured out what the problem that you're solving in is, you've really kind of been able to well define what that problem is. Once you start building that solution, continue to go out and keep talking to people, keep getting feedback. Again, that cycle of build, learn, whatever that cycle was. Constantly doing that. The other thing is kind of experimenting. So instead of just making a plan and trying to follow that, you want to do something that's a little bit more iterative, of like trying little mini experiments, this idea of failing fast, learning from what's working and what's not working, and then coming back and doing more experiments. And so this idea of like staying agile, don't create this like, you want to create a plan and a roadmap, but you don't want like a hard, fast plan that you have to stick to, because you want to be listening to feedback, using continuous learning to constantly being able to adapt. For example, you might have an idea and people are like, I hate that. And if you're so committed to that idea and you're realizing people don't want that, people aren't going to spend money on it, it's not solving a problem that people care about or experiencing, you need to be able to listen to that feedback and shift what you're doing or pivot what you're doing so that your solution is solving that problem. Because you could have like the greatest idea for a product or service out there, but if it's not solving a problem, it's not really a good business, because no one out there is actually going to be spending money on it, and then you don't have a business. The next thing is building a network. So you might be an engineer and you're building a solution that you think you can solve, but there's always going to be pieces and things that you don't know. And so having a network that you can rely on and ask questions to is going to be super, super valuable. I know in the workshop on Tuesday, we talked about having an advisory board and having mentors. So just constantly going out, create, if you don't already have a LinkedIn profile, start connecting with people on it. Because you're always going to need help. You're always going to want to get advice and kind of talk to someone who knows more about a topic than you do. You want to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, so that you can constantly be getting help from them. The last thing is just depersonalizing failure. So excuse me, reframing failure as a success, because you're constantly learning and you're getting better. I actually really hate when I go to talk to customers and they have nothing negative to say about something, because I'm like, I can't have done it perfectly. Like, something must have gone wrong. So I actually really like seeking out that negative feedback, because it allows you to like learn so much faster and iterate so much faster, and then you're not wasting time, money, and resources working on something that's not necessarily gonna be the perfect fit down the line. Okay, first steps in starting a business. So, my story, I started a food company called Algae. Algae is the first company creating consumer food products and agriculture products made with algae. I had an undergraduate degree in kinesiology, and I was supposed to go to med school. And then I realized that I really, really don't want to go to med school. And so in my fourth year, I was figuring out what was the right fit, what did I want to do? I did a bunch of things. I shadowed out some health professionals. I did a bunch of research. I took an entrepreneurship course very similar to this program that you guys are in, and was just sort of like feeling out what I liked and didn't like. And in the entrepreneurship course that I took, very similar to this, we had these content sessions, and then it was over the summer, and we had 2 weeks of just like basically straight lectures. It was horrible, but I didn't know anything about this stuff, so I learned a lot. And one of the key things was like finding a problem that you're passionate about. And at the time, I was trying to deal with food and sustainability. I was trying to be more sustainable at an individual level, and everything I was reading was talking about food is one of the biggest ways that you can affect your sustainability and your kind of carbon footprint. So I was reading more into it. I'm anemic and I'm allergic to soy. So for those of you that are plant-based or eat plant-based products, it's a lot easier today, but when I first did this about 4 years ago, everything was just made with soy. So there was like nothing I could eat. And instead of replacing the animal products that I was cutting out of my diet, I was just straight up not getting enough nutrients. And then you can imagine like the anemia kicked up, I had no energy, and it was just this vicious cycle. So I decided when I was doing this program that this was this was a summer program for me. I was not doing anything past the summer. I was starting a master's, also in kinesiology in the fall, so I had zero interest in actually starting a business. I was like, entrepreneurship is not for me. I'm just here to learn. Obviously that didn't happen, but I met my co-founder and we sort of decided that we both wanted to tackle this idea of food and sustainability. And so we started doing a lot of secondary research, which is like Googling, reading market reports, I was reading academic articles, trying to learn more about issues in the food industry with sustainability. And ultimately we came across a CNN and a Forbes article from a few years prior talking about how algae was the food of the future. I'm sure many of your reactions when I said I made algae-based foods was like, that's gross. Why would you eat algae? That was also my first reaction. I was like, why on earth would anyone want to eat this? But the more I read about it, the more I learned of the impact, both on the climate of how algae is a carbon sequester, so it requires very little resources, so it's very, very good for the planet to grow. Also, it's really nutrient dense, so specifically spirulina, for those of you that have heard of it, high in protein, high in iron, high in omegas, all of the things that I was missing in my diet by just completely cutting out animal products. So when we first started, our idea was, hey, we're starving students. Ramen noodles are super cheap. The only bad thing about ramen noodles is that there's no nutritional value to them at all. What if we take the algae and we put the algae in them? Then they're gonna be super nutrient dense. They'll be a little bit more expensive than regular ramen noodles, but if you don't have to add meat or vegetables to it because you're getting all of that nutrients from the algae, we're people will definitely pay more money for that, right? No problem. So you can see the photo on the left is sort of our first attempt at making algae ramen noodles. They're obviously very, very green. This is probably a little bit edited. They probably were actually a lot darker than that, especially before they were cooked. Now, we were smart and we did a lot of customer discovery. So our first idea was that we showed up to farmers markets and we just we didn't even sell anything. We just had a bunch of ramen noodles and we handed it out to people and we're like, try it. And then they were just like, what are you trying to feed me? Why on earth would I eat this dark green ball of something? And after we explained it to them and we're like, this is what we're doing, play the student cards for those of you that can play it because everyone helps students. People were like, okay, I guess I'll try it. And they were pleasantly surprised, especially with the algae, you were expecting a fishy taste. For whatever reason, I still don't even know today why, these noodles didn't really have a fishy taste. They just kind of tasted like plain noodles, but they were just super, super green. And so we were talking to people and getting feedback, and the feedback was like, this is cool, but I'm not comfortable enough with algae yet to have an entire meal based out of this. So we kept going back to farmers market and we kept getting sort of the same feedback over and over again. And that for us was this moment of okay, we're hearing the same thing over and over again from enough people that they like the idea of algae-based foods, but they don't want the noodles. Let's pivot. So our next idea was we tried a bunch of different snack food products. We made cookies, we made hummus, we made nachos and tortillas, we made juice, and everyone kept saying, I want a bar. And I was like, I will not make a bar. That is one of the most saturated markets in the world. We do not need another bar. There's a million out there. But everyone kept saying over and over and over again, I want a bar made with algae. That's what I want. And so finally, after getting enough of that feedback of people liking the products but not loving it and saying they wanted a bar, we finally had to pivot and start making a bar. And then, of course, we would go back out. We'd have, do you want a date-based bar? Do you want a granola bar? Do you want a nut-based bar? Do you want a fruit bar? So we then would make a bunch of different versions of it and give it out to people. So again, that constant idea of constantly talking to people and iterating and getting feedback. So I spent so much time for that first summer at farmers markets. We went to community events, we went to races, we went to food festivals, just having a bunch of products, not even really giving anything for people to pay, just giving away this product and talking to people and getting feedback. Eventually, we started with this first one. You can see, and this is why I say I cringe when I look at this, because it's such ugly, horrible packaging. But that was our first product. And we actually then were able to go to farmers markets. So we went to the Banff and Canmore farmers market. This was during COVID. And we started selling this. And again, getting feedback. And we kind of had narrowed in on a date-based bar. And then we narrowed in on what flavors. And then we were tweaking the formulations. And again, it was another summer of constantly being out and talking to people. And we were selling at this point, which is validation in itself that people are actually willing to spend their hard-earned money on your product. So that was another kind of check mark of like, yes, people like this product enough and they want to sell money. So again, we went to a ton of different events, had to like hang out. I do not like doing that. It's horrible, but that's what we had to do in order to get that feedback, get that validation, and be able to learn so that we could then justify going and producing more. So then once we had done all of this prototyping by ourselves. And so then that once we had finalized a formulation and we were ready to go, we needed to stop making them in our like student kitchens, and we wanted to start making them in a commercial facility that could make a lot more quickly and could have that really nice packaging. So we went to a test facility, and it was a super cool experience. We had to like wear all of this like PPE and get all protected, and this was also during COVID, and we got to actually go and see these bars being made at this huge scale, see them getting packaged really professionally, and it was very cool to just kind of like see, at that point it had been about a year and a half, and see like all the hard work we had put in really coming to fruition into a product that we could then start selling into stores. We then launched into a handful of stores in kind of Canmore, Banff, Calgary area, and we're able to sell there, and really like, again, we were able to like sell into these stores, and now our store are these, because we're selling to the stores and the stores are selling to the consumers, these stores are our customer. So then we were able to go in with this small number of stores and start to iterate and validate, find out, was the pricing right, was the branding, was the messaging we had on the packaging right, and iterate and constantly learn from that. Not this past summer, but the summer before, we then started spreading. So now we're selling across in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. And what that was involved in was like a lot of guerrilla marketing and a lot of just like putting ourselves out there and telling our story. People really love to see you put in the hard work, and they're more willing to support you. And in doing that, we've been able to launch with a few different distributors. We've been able to launch into over 100 stores, including Whole Foods. So we've really been able to kind of go out and grow. But the learnings from day one of like talking to people about algae-based foods, what kind of food do you want? I, even to this day, 4 years later, still go back and reference the data that we have from those first conversations, back when I swore that this was just a summer project and I definitely was not going to continue on. So it really has kind of that constant iteration and going out to talk to people, in my opinion and in my experience, is truly the best way to really get to the heart of what is the problem that you're solving, and how can you kind of learn and build and iterate based off of that feedback. And as you can see, we've gotten to do like quite a few kind of fun out there things. We sponsored a race, bike race, and we had a space-themed aid station. So we got to dress up in like these fun alien costumes, which was actually horrible because it was like 30 degrees and they were like giant greenhouses, and I was sweating. We filmed a commercial in the lake. Don't ask me why. We just did it. It worked well. And so a lot of times what we're doing, what we're actually really known for, is like we'll hike up to like the top of a mountain or like up a trail network and set up a table and give out samples. The reason we do that is that our consumers are the kind of outdoor enthusiast weekend warrior, and you want to go where your customers are, and our customers are like not in the grocery store, our customers are in the mountains. So we went to meet our customers in the mountains. We've done a lot of wild things. We carried a rowing machine up the top of Hauling for a photo shoot. That was sort of the idea that kicked it all off. Again, we filmed a commercial in a lake. So we've done a lot of these really crazy things, but that's sort of what we've become known for. We've been able to generate some partnerships with some really, really big brands like Panasonic and Subaru and Lumix to kind of help tell that story as a way to just help get that name out there and get our brand out there. But again, the reason that these brands want to work with us is because we're so tied into our consumers and our customers and what they want and what they need. We've got all this valuable data. So that's a little bit of my story and how I got started. And so with that, some key takeaways. Don't do it on your own. Having a network, having a group of people that you can rely on is super valuable and important because there are things you know, there are the things you know you don't know, but there's a lot of things that you don't know that you don't know. And so having a really good network of people that you can tap into and ask questions is like so invaluable. And with that, figuring out what you're good at and what you like doing and what you don't like doing, and then finding people who can help you fill that gap, especially for people who are looking to join a team or looking to add people to a team. That's why I've kind of asked you guys, like, what are the gaps that you're looking to fill? Always ask questions, always, always, always. Seek out mentors, have a network, seek out mentors, have people to talk to. Also just like stay motivated to like, there's gonna be days where you're like, this sucks, I hate this, I can't do this. And having those mentors who you can call and like cry to on the phone and they're like, you're fine, just chill out, you got this, is super valuable. And also don't scale too quickly. We didn't really touch on that, but the idea of kind of pacing yourself, starting slow, doing the steps that you need to do with that iterative cycle at the beginning is really gonna help you lay the foundation, and so that when the time comes, you can scale quickly and appropriately. I don't know why that was there. Okay, let's talk about why startups fail. I don't know what happened to my deck. Why do startups fail? So these are the top 20 reasons why startups fail. So one is no market need. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, is that people love to build products. And the amount of you guys who have been like, what are you working on? And you tell me like what you're trying to build. But do you know what the problem, that is solving? Because again, you could have like the most amazing product service out there, but if there's no need for it, no one's spending money on it, and then what? The next thing is running out of cash. This is a big one. Money is always gonna be an issue. You're always gonna wish you had more money. You're also always gonna wish you had more people and more time. So really being conscious of your financials from the onset at the very beginning is very valuable. I can tell you from personal experience, this is definitely something you should do because otherwise you're gonna be scrambling later. Again, can tell you that from experience. And then the next thing in the top 3 is actually not the right team. So this could be that there's issues between the co-founders in terms of compatibility in working, whereas people have different opinions of what they should do next. And if there's issues between the co-founders, that can lead to a lot of problems. And honestly, that can also like dissolve a whole company. But also having, if there's gaps and you don't have, even if you don't have a co-founder on that team, if you have someone on your advisory board or a mentor that can kind of help to fill that gap, that's also super helpful. So just really making sure that you constantly are sort of doing like an inventory of like, how is this relationship working? Do we have the right team? Are there any gaps on the team? And the thing to note too is as you kind of evolve into the different stages of your company, you're gonna have different needs at different times. And so this is where having advisors and mentors that you can kind of tap into and ask questions at different times is really gonna make a difference. So again, some reasons why startups fail: talk to customers and users. They don't talk to customers and users before building. So you just build something that you think you want, you don't ask anyone. Maybe you ask your friends, which is not enough, and then that's it. They do not become an expert on the problem. So like I said, having a really, really clear problem definition is gonna go so far, and really immersing yourself and experiencing that consumer pain point is gonna be so helpful as you build. Another reason is they do not create an MVP. So spending as little money, resources, as time as possible, getting that product out there, as horrible as it is, as long as it's like the base amount, it's like baseline functional, to get feedback. But if you spend so much time and money trying to build like this perfect product or service, you're probably gonna just waste all of that time and money, and it's not gonna get you the results that you want. The next thing is not talking, building, and testing. So again, that customer discovery process, we're gonna like dive super deep into that this entire program. So you guys are gonna know that super well, I promise. Another reason is not identifying all key stakeholders and understanding their experience with the problem. So again, really becoming an expert on the problem, immersing yourself, and making sure you're considering everyone who's involved. We've got a session next week on sort of systems thinking, and it's of kind of considering everybody and every organization, every stakeholder who's involved. The next thing is not confirming assumptions before you act on them. So again, this kind of ties back to the customer discovery. You have an idea about something, you don't go talk to people, you don't go talk to your customers and your stakeholders, and then you just act on them, and then if they're wrong, again, you've kind of wasted that money, that time, those resources on doing something that's wrong. And the last thing is keeping your bias in check. So understanding the perspective and the point of view that you're coming from as you approach this problem, and really taking the time, again, this goes back to understanding the problem super, super well, and becoming an expert on the problem of like, what is my experience with the problem? Who's actually experiencing the problem? Is it someone who's like me and has the same experience, or is it someone different? So all reasons why startups fail is because they don't do these things, and you want to make sure that you do. Essentially, this all kind of boils down to not doing good customer discovery and not really becoming an expert on the problem. So things we're all going to help you guys with. Okay, the last thing we're going to touch on is just a bunch of keywords related to Startup Dictionary. So customer discovery, I've talked about that quite a bit today. Basically, this is the primary research that identifies who your potential customers are and key information about them that you're going to use in developing your messaging, your marketing, your product. The one thing that this definition is missing is you're also going to use them to help understand the problem. Again, becoming an expert on the problem so you can then continue to do that customer discovery to develop the product. The next thing is market validation. So this is a process that you're going to use to determine, is there actually a need for this product or this service? Are people going to actually pay for this? Because if you don't have customers and you don't have income and you don't have revenue coming in, you don't have a business. So again, early on, you really want to get that market validation done and really make sure that there is a need and there are going to be paying customers for that, whatever that product service is. A prototype is a very early stage product development tool where you're building the first version of your product and testing it for features and functionality. Now, a prototype can be a drawing on a paper napkin. It can be a CAD model of something. It can be a 3D sketch. My favorite example, BlackBerry, their prototype was a carved block of wood that they used to go to investor meetings so that the investors could get a feel of what the product, their end product, their vision would be, so they could put it in their pocket, they could hold it in their hand. And it was literally just a carved block of wood. As you can probably imagine, with BlackBerry, they spent a lot of time and money and development time to build that, but without first validating with that prototype, they would have wasted a lot of time and money. And I'm sure they had a lot of wrong assumptions that they then tested out because they had this kind of early prototype and they were able to go talk to people. A minimum viable product is that first product that you go to market with. So again, this is sort of using that market validation where you kind of test those key features, and that could be like 1 or 2 key features. And you can also play around with the price before you fully launching it. So having sort of like an alpha or a beta test. And this is really, really crucial, again, in kind of providing that customer feedback and getting that iteration and constantly learning, validating your assumptions so that when you actually launch the full product, you've got the best product that you know customers want, that you know people will pay for. So a pilot is an initial release or launch of that product or service. So this would be kind of that first release of the MVP. Typically, you do this to like a smaller group before conducting a larger campaign. So in my example, our pilot was that we started selling at a farmer's market. That's obviously like a lot smaller scale than if we were to launch into co-op and be like, hey, all of Calgary, try this product. We were then able to get that feedback. If you're building a software, you might want to collect like email, like create an email list of people who are interested, and then when you're ready to launch that MVP, you can then release it just to that email list and get feedback from them. And kind of the conditions of them getting early access is that they have to give you feedback. A pivot is when you do all these testing, you get all this feedback, and you realize that what you're building doesn't necessarily fit with what you're trying to do. So what you're trying to build doesn't fit with the problem of what the customer wants, and so you're changing your strategy and whatnot. An example in my company, we started with ramen noodles, and people were like, we do not want this. So we had to pivot to a snack-based product, which eventually became a bar. So it's just kind of taking that feedback, being super agile, and changing what you're doing. It can be really small, it can be really big. It could be like a complete shift to a new industry, or it can be something, I'm gonna say ours was a medium pivot. It could be starting with, if you release the MVP with this feature that you thought was most important, and the feedback is like, that's great, but I want you to start with this. That is like a smaller shift or pivot. Okay, a sprint is a short, typically it's 2 weeks. It ultimately depends on your team, what you're doing, what the timelines look like. But basically, it's like a period where you kind of have a clear set of work that you use to kind of get milestones done. This is, I think, most frequently used in kind of some dev work, but it's always about kind of at the onset of that 2 weeks, you sort of set a goal. Each person on the team understands what they're going to accomplish in that 2 weeks. You do the work, and then at the end, you have this reflection where you talk about what went well, what didn't go well, both from how you guys function as a team, but also in terms of like what you're building, any challenges, roadblocks that came up. Value proposition and unique value proposition, we're gonna have like a whole dive into this so much more. But ultimately, the value proposition is like the reason why someone uses your product. So it's not necessarily about what are the features that you're providing them, but what is the value that you're providing to them. So an example with Uber, the features that Uber is providing is it's providing you of transportation from point A to point B. But the value of what it's doing is like you track the safe, you can know who your driver is, you can see the safety check. The value is you can see on the map where they are, where they're going, you can see the values, you know how much it's gonna cost you ahead of time. So that's the value, and it's different than like the service that Uber's offering. And then the unique value proposition is what sets your company apart from a competitor. So again, being in the bar industry, there's like a million bars out there. So what do we have? Our value proposition is like what sets us apart from like the million of other bars that exist in the market. Okay, I think this is the last one. So these are all funding terms. So bootstrapping is financing in the very early stages of a business. Usually it's like using personal money, taking early sales and investing that back into the company, using grants or prize money from pitch competitions, for example, and then potentially like family friend contributions to help fund the business. An angel investor is a high worth individual who invests in companies and ideas. So they're actually investing their own personal money into a company, and typically there's a criteria that they need to hit in order to be able to be considered an angel investor in terms of how much money they need to have and earn every year and whatnot. But it's them investing their own personal money into a company. So typically with angel investors, you do that. There's smaller size checks, kind of up to $250,000, $500,000. But typically they have to really believe in what you're doing. There's a lot of considerations when going between angel and venture and VCs, but an angel is someone investing their personal money. A venture capitalist is an investor that provides money to companies that have potential for very high growth, but they also, same with angel investors, they're taking an equity, so they're taking a piece of ownership in your company. With venture capitals, it's not their own money that they're investing, it's a pool of money that a firm has that then they go and invest in a number of startups. So it's not just one investor, and typically when you're raising money from a bunch of VCs, you're getting a few different VCs and a few different firms involved. Again, lots of different considerations. These are larger check sizes, but you do need to show really, really rapid growth because everyone wants to make their money back, and they are putting a lot of money in, so they want to get a lot of money out. We are going to dive into a whole finance session, and we'll jump into kind of angel versus venture investment because there's tons of considerations, and we could go on for hours about just those two. Okay, with that, are there any questions from today's session? Ricky, are there any online? Okay. All right, so that's next week we have problem discovery and system thinking. So this is really learning how to identify customer and user problems, how to create a problem statement, and understanding how the problem that you're solving fits into a larger system and the implications that it has. So thank you all for coming. A quick, easy way to kind of get started into the program. I promise things are gonna pick up and get super intense very quickly. So thank you all for coming, and I will see you all next week in the workshop on Tuesday. Good, how are you?
I'm James.
Hi.
I'm Royal.
Hello, how are you doing?
Thank you so much.
How are things going with Hellminder?
It's going good.
Good.
Like we have like a, let's say like an early
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have a prototype that we made there. We have a thing.
Okay, nice.
Like back at school there at MRU, they told us, like Ray, I don't know if you know Ray is, yeah, he told me to, so we're working on getting a prototype number 2 done. That's about it.
Nice. Are you doing the Launchpad program there as well?
Yes.
Did you already do it? Did you do a different?
Lab with them
Okay, yeah.
in the lab, but not the full.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Well, I hope this is helpful. And there's also, I think Kaylin can get access to the makerspace if you guys need any help with prototyping and things like that.
Do you know if I'll be able to get to the detail?
I can't